Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 160 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Oh boy.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's been a week of work again.
Yeah.
In a day. Like, it wasn't even a matter of like, this whole week has just been cut. No, it was in a day. It was like crazy today.
Yep.
I felt like I had meeting, phone call, meeting, Teams meeting, phone call. Like,
I'm feeling that too because I took last week off as vacation.
Yeah.
And I work a solo position, so like I have no backup in my job.
Yeah, it just piles.
But it just piles for the week. So yeah. I was almost hitting the bottom of my backlog today, and then they start piling more stuff on me, and
yeah.
Aside from that, the world, I'm just very world weary right now. So Wednesday night therapy night is going to be good for me.
We did have your game.
We did have my game, and
we had something happen in your game, which we talk about. And I wanted to make sure we addressed it because I thought it went better than I expected. At the same time, kind of like we've been talking around this for months.
Yeah, we talk about how our games have, points of failure too. No table is perfect. No table is immune to this sort of stuff.
Right.
And we had a moment where one player did something and it really tilted you out of character, like you personally, Rob.
Yeah.
And you X-carded it.
I did.
And you were like, nope, I'm calling bullshit on this. Yep. And I'm like, are you X-carding this? And you were like, yeah, you know what? I am X-carding it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah. And we just paused the game at that point and had a conversation.
What's going on? And we talked through it like adults. Some opinions were shared about how different characters were executing their characters within the plot, how those actions were perceived, what the motivations behind certain things were. 'Cause I think you had you had the wrong perception of what the other player was trying to do with the action that you X-carded. Yes. But at the same time, that player had never made it clear that in any way whatsoever that that's what their motivations were. Yep. So there was nothing for you to have known.
Yeah. And the execution of everything, I think, went really well. I think I stepped into it, and even they pointed out later that the trigger was obvious. It was the end of the plot that was involving my character. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had gotten my role-playing point to wrap it up with a bow, basically. And be like, perfect, this is kind of the closure I wanted. I'm handing it back to the storyteller and say we're good. You put a
cherry on top of it, and that other player swooped in and grabbed the cherry.
Right, and I'm like, that wasn't for you.
Right.
And it instantaneously tilted me. It was like, wow, I feel like this has been stolen.
But the great, and this is the reason we're bringing this up as a positive though, is that, we all talked through it like adults. And it did take about 20 minutes or so, to talk through it.
Oh God,
in total. But I think everybody got their voices heard.
Yep.
And at the end, your reaction was very much like, I'm actually really glad this discussion happened.
Very much so.
It's the first time anyone's ever X-carded anything at my table.
Yeah.
And you said, like, a year ago, I'd have just sat there and quietly fumed about it.
And then privately talked about it with you later, which wouldn't have resolved it.
Which wouldn't have resolved it, because I would have had to telephone game through me, through everybody else, et cetera, et cetera.
The situation still would have happened, too.
Exactly. So. And this time around, we basically tested that the X card would work at the table, and it did.
Yeah.
And your assessment of it was basically that we you now feel more comfortable that that is a mechanic we can use, and that the table will not react adversely to it.
Correct. And I think some of the other members at our table who would question whether they could get the strength to throw one, I think said that even came back with like, I'm not usually comfortable with these kind of situations. And by the end of it, like, okay, I got it. Yeah. Like, this makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I thought it was really good. I think it was a moment for me to basically, I threw it out there in the sense that I was unprepared for it, but I think you're calling me on and be like, is this an X card? Do we need to stop? And I was like, yes. I think that was the best way to open it, was like, okay, let's pause this. Let's get into this.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and there's a number of ways I could have resolved that. If you'd have just said, yeah, you at the end of the discussion, you were like, okay, I understand why you were doing the thing you were doing. You're not actually stealing the cherry. You're just you're trying to transplant the cherry somewhere else and keep it in the story. And I understand now your motivations instead of just being a selfish jerk.
Right. Like just continuing to play that aspect of your character because it's the only one we're seeing.
Right. You essentially tried to take a magical artifact out of bounds.
Right.
And the other player tried to bring it back into bounds.
Right. Like I don't need my character ever seeing this again or interacting with this again. In fact, my character's getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And it turned around and I was okay with it because the explanation was there and we were able to meta through it. And I think that exposed quite a bit for me and that other character, and it exposed how we could move through things.
Sure.
But I think it worked really well, and it showed that, like we talk about, like even at the most advanced tables where people have been friends for decades.
Yeah.
In our cases, it's still hard to go and step in and do X carding kind of stuff.
Oh, it is. Well, it's because none of us like confrontation, you know, and telling the storyteller to bring their story to a screeching halt because, you know, you don't want to be the squeaky wheel, you know, etc.
Well, it's your game, and I'm just trying to enjoy it. And but you gave me like this plot to work on, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna invest a little bit of myself into this character and see where it's going, and you were able to work with me about like because I really hadn't given a lot of backstory.
Yeah,
and this kind of. Through game, you kind of helped see what, you know, you gave me why paths of like, okay, here's an option. I'm going to point out what you did. And then we're going to, like, through game kind of expose it and talk about it.
Sure.
And you kept layering those out until we got to a point where it was very wide. Like, we're at a fork in the road. What you going to do?
Yeah.
And I played through that. I was like, okay, I feel pretty good about this. And it was like, in having that close with a lemon just felt so off.
But in the end, actually, after the discussion, then I put the power right back in your hands of like, okay, now that we've talked it out, do you still want your X card to stand?
Yeah.
And you were like, no, actually, I think now that I understand the motivations, now that I understand what is happening in the story here, I'm taking the X card back.
Right.
It's
and
cool.
saying,
It's cool
let it
to
roll.
let it go.
Right.
Didn't end up making much of a difference anyways because the character didn't accomplish what they were trying to do. But,
no, but it allowed the moment to exist. And it wasn't like you don't hide your role, so it was just a matter of how things rolled out.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, it was like, it was good that we took that pause.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, I thought it was fantastic.
Overall though, I think it went really great.
Game went very well.
Put an amazing little bow on the end of a
Started with a spit take.
It started with a spit take, which was great. You rarely see those.
Yep.
But I think we put a nice little bow on it, and I think we're gonna, so next game session, is probably coming up. We're trying to find a date in June where we can go.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna do a session 0.3.
Yeah, because we're stepping out of this story and into the new one.
Well, not only that, but we're all new to Savage Worlds. And so, like even I, as a storyteller, didn't know Savage Worlds. I'd never run Savage Worlds up until this point. So, being that we're all kind of new, we all kind of made our characters in that vacuum of not understanding the system. I'm kind of offering just like free respecs. And I did this with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition too when we very first started. It was like, okay, we're through the first major plot arc. We've got like 5 games under our belt. Let's all take a moment back and say like, okay, what did we like with our characters? What didn't we like? And no questions asked. You get another free like character, like just make your character again.
Yeah, if you need to.
If you need to. If there's spells you didn't find were useful, things that you didn't think,
weird mechanics.
You want a D6 in your notice instead of D4 or whatever, cool. Whatever. Move points are on as long as it's fair at the end of the day and follows the character creation rules, then awesome.
Yeah, and we're getting another effectively raise of our characters, another level up.
Yeah.
Within their world, which I always get bad. What's the term? It's not a raise.
It's an advance.
Advance, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I'm terrible at remembering these things, but yeah. So, yeah. And my game is Saturday.
Yep.
And we're talking about my game tonight.
And tonight is your campaign breakdown. So we have stalled for long enough. We have stalled for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You are not immune to your own BS.
I am not immune to my own BS. My game has been going on for a very long time.
So let's hear about it. What is your campaign?
So my D&D campaign is a high fantasy of unlikely adventurers.
Okay.
And I say that in the sense that not everyone is from the world that I set up. And that made it more challenging for me right off the bat, but at the same time gave me kind of some very interesting hooks and info and things to look up and kind of pull together. It was originally actually in D&D 3.5, and then we flipped to 5th edition. In essence, I wanted a world without gods. Mm-hmm. Considering one of the players is a cleric who was coming from another world, I wanted to see how that would play out with them. How that would come off.
Actually, the funny thing to note about that character is actually from my homebrew game world.
Right, which I discussed with you a little before I even ran this. I was like, I'm interested to know more about that character and what happened in that world. And you just gave me a few elements that I pulled from.
Yeah, it was something I wrote in high school, so it wasn't too great. But
no, but at the same time, it was memories, and I think that was one of the things that I liked about it was I wanted everybody to have something that they were really interested in. I didn't want to let them limit, but I wanted them to be interesting characters.
Sure.
And so in that, it kind of was a sandbox game in a world that I had designed with a very soft premise that sat behind the whole thing.
Worth noting, too, that this is actually how I met you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was invited by that cleric's player as a mutual friend to come join your D&D game.
Yep.
And the rest is history, so.
Yeah, so that was 15 years ago.
15 years ago.
That we started this chaos.
Oh my god. That was a whole gender ago for me.
That was. It is exceptionally interesting that as I went through my notes, I had all of the times when I would see the previous administration listed, I would have to question, be like, oh, that's right. Okay. And I've known you for 15 years.
Been so long you forgot my dead name.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's just, I have to think about it.
Yeah.
I literally have to take the time to think about it, which I really respect myself for being able to shift things, because my brain always goes back and rewrites those things in my head.
Yep.
So yeah, 15 years.
So, alright, here's a question for you.
Okay.
Now, 7th Sea is typically your wheelhouse.
It is.
And so, when you're conceiving of a new campaign, you chose D&D over 7th Sea. What was your thought process behind that?
Number one, the 7th Sea First Edition engine and mechanics are not really friendly with making new worlds. They're really bound by the 7th Sea mythos to a degree that it's very hard to kind of do anything else in them. You could take 7th Sea and run it like it's mythos in something else, but to take the mechanics and try and shift it falls apart. There are aspects that would work, but I knew I was going to have casters. I knew I was going to have those things, and I didn't want them to be hampered or limited. And so, and having players who were like, oh, I've always wanted to play this character, I only got to play this character for a little bit, or I'm really I was interested in this, or give a player who traditionally just fills the role, of what needs to be filled in, like the opportunity to say, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
I'm literally going to give you carte blanche here to do what you want, and hearing them go, okay, crack their knuckles and go to town.
Right.
And I had that. I got that out of the group, and I really did love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in that sense, D&D kind of hit the mark, because 3.5 at the time wasn't bad.
No, it was the soup du jour at the time.
At the time, there was a lot of really neat things about it. A lot of, I think there was a hotness to it because people were like, "Oh, it's got feats and it's got these other things in it." And
it was such a refreshing breath of fresh air after 2nd edition.
Yeah,
basically they had me at "There's no Thaco."
Yeah,
yeah,
and at the same time, like I had play tested some of it. With one of the players before 3.5 came out, and I was happy that we got a 0.5. I was really happy about that. Like, it needed it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like...
I hated buying all the books again.
Yeah, tell me about it. But I think that there were a lot of elements to it that really was intriguing to me and allowed me to kind of create a scope that worked out really well. And I was going to have elements that fit a more generic fantasy setting, and at the time, I wasn't going to go after GURPS.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go after Palladium. Like, I didn't want to try and throw a whole bunch of people, and most of my players knew D&D well enough to be able to say, like, if I'm talking about a race, or I'm talking about a power, or I'm talking about something, they all could very comfortably pick it up.
Yeah, that's true. I think 15 years ago, like, I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly what the role-playing landscape looked like, but I don't think Dungeon World was around.
No, it was not.
I don't think, I mean, we didn't have the One Ring RPG and that, you know, so, I mean, as far as, like,
in mainstream.
I'm gonna run a generic fantasy game, I don't know that you had a lot of options 15 years ago other than 3rd edition D&D.
Yeah, well, at least not ones that I felt comfortable running.
Right. You could go to a generic system, but yeah. I mean, if you're looking to do, like, generic high fantasy, I mean, D&D is like that. That's what it's good at.
It was the bread and butter at the time too.
So after quite a bit of a hiatus,
yes,
which I'm sure we'll touch on later.
Oh yeah.
We got back into the game.
We did.
After being on pause for a while.
2019, I want to say we jumped back in, and part of that jump for me was that 5th edition came out. We
skipped 4th altogether.
We just scrapped it. I found some notes about 4th, and I think I just threw them away pretty much and didn't never use them.
Heat sinks in live chat groups. Yeah.
But after the break, D&D Beyond became a thing. We had 5th edition was good, and so I kind of said, like, how hard is it going to be to get us going again, and are people interested in playing it again? And I did have the interest. It was there, and I'm like, okay, I need this because I need to do something. I already have this established. People want to know where things are going, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to restart. I'm not restarting this, but I'm hitting the power on button for this and saying, okay, if we start here, this is how I'm going to start it. And I kind of power forced you guys into Act 4.
Yeah.
I did a hard move into Act 4 a lot faster than I expected. But I think that the pause was good because I think if we played 3.5 into 4 and then 4 into 5, it would have been garbage mechanically. I think I would have had a lot more issues and I would have struggled a lot more. But at the same time, it was more about the story, and I recognized how much I had shifted into story mode.
Yeah.
I think looking back at even on flipping into 5th edition, I probably should have done something else, done another system. So hindsight in that sense, there could have been other systems that I moved into. But really, it was the opening gambit of us starting to talk more about gaming. Like, we started going over, because of D&D Beyond, things in gaming, and that's where, like, how are you running this? How are you looking at this? You know, what other systems and things are we looking at doing? Is this even the right system?
And it was those very talks that we said, why don't we just start a podcast? And here we are. So now you guys all get to put up with us.
Yeah, so I think that since then, now that my players, because I think you all jumped in at 9th level. We are now 10th.
Yes.
Going on to 11th.
I mean, you've been using Milestone XP.
Yeah, I think this next,
and you've made it pretty clear that, like, race to advancement is not a big focus of this. So honestly, like, if we just sit at 10th level,
it's not that big of a deal.
We're in the home stretch of your story anyways, so.
Yeah, but I wanted you guys to get to a point where, like, and we talked about this, where, like, you can fight a god. Like, they're not as critical as a problem, and that was a part of my game. I wanted that to come around as a possibility, that you guys could meet, and duel with a god. And I was like, okay, let's get that chance out on the table.
All right.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, we'll get to the themes and elements of your story a little bit in a little bit.
Sure.
But let's start off with kind of some of the more mundane stuff. So, just from a storyteller standpoint, just what goes on behind the screen? Is there even a screen? What tools do you employ to organize your campaign and execute your game at the table?
Originally, like 15 years ago, I used a lot of Word. And Notepad documents. Almost every game session I had a Word or 2 document that was describing pretty much everything that was going on and all my info about them. And then I'd have a Notepad that was just trash full of pretty much rolls and monsters and hit points and things that happened and notable quotes and things like that during the sessions.
Right on. You've
shorthanding.
You've since moved on to Google Docs.
Yep,
then.
I do use Google Docs heavily now. I keep spreadsheets, NPC names, and I replicate my episode sheet, so I'm keeping my formatting, and I can carry information over really easy. So I love that about it, and it's accessible on tons of devices for me, so I can literally, at a moment's notice, go write something.
Sure, and if you need me to print something for you or something with that in full
quick
color,
share.
you can just quick share it off to me and whatnot.
Which is great. Or share to the group very easily with just a quick link. And I love that. Back to, which I think backs up my Discord, which I think is invaluable. I love that Discord is not just a messenger and not just a message thread and not just a voice space.
I've been loving Discord, for gaming especially.
I think it's changed the landscape because it's effectively infinite tagged storage conversation. Yeah. And that right there is huge. Being able to put links and put pictures and tag things and pin them. Yep. All of those things come into play so well, and they're just so naturally easy in there. I mean, I'm selling Discord, and yes, it's annoying when you have 100 servers, and each server has, 60 channels in it, and people are adding you and everyoneing and hearing, and you've got to mute things. Yeah, that's no different than the news groups and things like that before.
Go Gadget Introvert, I have 10.
Yeah, but at the same time, having that access to that much information and be able to quickly search through it makes it amazing to be able to go back and look at stuff, and I love that. I love that about about moving the gameplay, especially during the pandemic. It was huge.
Oh, it was huge, yeah. Especially with the voice channels and stuff that we had to play remote and whatnot. It was easy to switch over. Yeah. You mentioned D&D Beyond before being one of the big draws.
I remember when you got your subscription. Yeah. You bent the money and dropped $300.
Yeah, the $300, the PHB DMG Monster Manual, and I think Xanathar's Guide or something like that was all involved in there.
Yeah, and it was great because I remembered playing in your game, being able to quickly make characters and see all of the available stuff for them.
And as long as you were in a campaign with me, because I had the Master subscription, all of my books got shared with you guys, so you guys had all that at your fingertips.
Yeah. And then I just ended up buying my own. Yep. And supporting it from there because they had a good deal on it, and I'm still keeping it to this day because it's really nice to have all those character sheets available for everybody to be able to put in some campaign notes. I feel like there's more that they could do for the meat and potatoes of the campaign and support on that side. And I definitely think they need to work on the encounter engine and things like that because I feel like there's a lot of problems still in that.
There's talk that they're going to try to expand it into a full-blown VTT. I mean, we'll see how it happens, and I think both of us are kind of moving away from this as a game system anyways. So
right. I just feel that there's a lot of things they could be doing, and I think they're waiting to make too much.
Maybe.
Modularize it. Don't try and make it one big thing.
I think Wizards also recently bought it.
They did. It's back in the wheelhouse. So yeah, it's interesting to see what they end up going with and how that development cycle goes.
So speaking of VTTs,
yeah, I used Foundry. I actually started with the original tabletop simulator, which was unlimited and kind of bulky and didn't do as good a job as I'd like because it had the appeal that everybody could use it and have access to it, and it was cool when it worked. But if your system wasn't up to snuff, there were assets you just wouldn't even see.
Yeah, assets wouldn't load. There would just be little white dots, and you were like, "Look at this amazing table I set out," and I'm like, "Oh, you mean the map with the white dots on it?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that made it really hard. So then I moved to Foundry VTT, which I actually run my own server. I have it here. Yep. And that was really nice to be able to have ownership, to be able to control it, and it's web-based, so everyone has the same view, which is really nice. There's a lot of great compression features that they do in it to make it stream really easy on pretty much every device.
And a lot of really great plugins for, and it can run multiple game systems too. So I know there's a Savage Worlds module out there for it and some of that. So.
Yeah. So it was a lifesaver, especially during COVID, to be able to have the assets that I needed quickly loaded and to be able to invest time into it, little bits at a time. Because it was my own server and have control, the cost was very low. The investment could be whenever I had time for it, and I could just leave it up.
Now for your VTT, you had a need then for like battle maps and stuff like that.
Yes.
So you and I kind of put our heads together on that one and discovered a couple really good ones. You've been pulling a lot from like Patreon.
Yes, I found a number of Patreon people who I love. I think they do incredible maps. I think their stories within their maps are amazing, and for very little money, like dollars a month, you have access to all of these maps that they create and like backup versions of them and sketch versions of them and things like that. And most of them now are either going forward or have actually gone back and done edits where it's already part of VTT that you literally drop it in and all of the walls and lighting works.
Oh yeah, the walls, the animated lighting and stuff like that.
And then you have animated maps that are now in a WebP format, which are amazing because you have seas that move and lights that flicker and other effects. I threw one in one of my games where it was the end part of the tree for one of the sections, and you could hear the tree groaning and moving. And I loved that, adding that feel and having leaves falling and depth of field. It was beautiful to be able to grab those things because I'm not an artist. Which we ran into when I started doing maps. I felt terrified about doing maps and being good at it.
And we actually, there was a past episode we did, off the top of my head, I don't remember the number for it, but it was, the title of it is, Environmental Storytelling with Maps.
Yeah.
When I did get you into using Dungeon Draft. And explained to you that it's not art, it's environmental storytelling.
Yep.
And that was kind of that break point for you where you were like, wait, hold on a second. Yeah, no, I don't have to draw something. I don't have to be artistic. I just have to describe the room and put the stuff that I'm describing into the room.
Right.
Off of the multiple palette of...
Yeah, and I think my fear came from years of watching people do things in Photoshop with layers and knowing how to do that versus slap, paint, slap, look, it's and it looks good.
And it looks great.
Yeah.
It looks great. I've seen the maps you've created and they're phenomenal.
Yeah, I feel much better about it, so I've kind of stepped away from the I'm not good enough vibe on that. I definitely do not feel that I'm at the level of some of the map creators that I've seen, but I make some decent maps.
Yeah, but sure, exactly. One of the other things that you introduced me to that we've both been making heavy use of. In fact, you were making use of it just this afternoon to put together an NPC card for one of your other NPCs. Is artflow.ai.
Yes, I highly recommend it. It's not a sales thing. It's available for free. Everyone should just log in and use it.
And you just type a word description of the type of face shot you're looking for it to generate, and an AI generates.
I literally typed in the other day, male punchable face with a smirk, and got that.
And got basically the guy you were looking for.
Yeah, well... I went into higher detail because I wanted to get a very specific thing, and
I added the words with a mustache.
Yeah. Well, what was funny was I had an image in my mind of what the person looked like, and I was able to create it in an STL mini that I sent to you, so you could get it printed and painted up. But I also wanted to try and create an image for that, and marrying up a digital image with with not having an art piece first gets kind of challenging, but I remembered the actor, and it was Cary Ellis from Princess Bride.
Yeah, sure.
I remember his mustache when it was thicker in another movie, and so I was like, oh, okay, I'll start with Cary Ellis, see if I can get Cary Ellis with a heavy mustache, and I started that direction, and literally just kept adding words until I got exactly what I wanted, and I came up with 2 versions of it and sent it to you today. And all of that was just me writing words until I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I love that. I absolutely love that ability that AI can help you to that level.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think everybody should try it. Just give it a shot. And if you want to see a sample of one of my NPC cards, let me know. I'll throw it in the Discord so you guys can see what those look like.
Same.
It's fun. It is a lot of fun.
So you do use a GM screen.
From time to time I have, yeah.
You don't really use neither of us have, we've both kind of moved away from like hiding our stuff from the players.
Totally.
We kind of more roll out in the open and stuff like that now.
Yeah, my last session I didn't even have it up. The only thing I had up was my tablet.
Yeah.
And I just keep my bucket out for everybody to see.
I put mine up last game because it has a bunch of combat rules on the inside of it.
It helps. It honestly helps.
Reference. So you talked about your NPC cards for a little bit. So NPC cards were something that kind of happened organically, actually, out of my need to have visual information
about my NPCs and a little bit of story to be able to tie the words.
Remind me who
laws.
this dude is.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a game that's been running for 15 years. There's probably 7 years of gameplay, and that's a lot of NPCs. That's a lot of story. That's a lot of movement. It's hard to keep track of things. It really, really is. So I recommend it, but even for smaller games, it gives you another tactile thing that your players can play with.
Exactly.
You know, to keep those players who need something to stare at or read, they love that. They love that.
Now you also like to employ minis and train.
I do on occasion. I still have a deep part of my heart of wanting to build a giant dungeon and slowly reveal it to my players. You know, I envy Draven every time I see his dungeon crap get set out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I look at that and I'm like, oh man, I so want to get in on the dungeon and just drop some minis in there, you know? And instead, like, I end up doing digital stuff because I don't have the space and I don't have the time to paint and I don't have all the other things that go along with that. But I have so much respect for it that I have such a visualization for it that I will do scenes in Mini because I still feel it's important to have that tactile edge.
Well, the good news is you've got both myself and you've got our mutual friend Erica who have just tons of stuff.
Yeah.
So the moment you're like, hey guys, you guys have like bunch of dark elves. Yep.
I mean, I just need something like, we got that, you know, kind of a thing. That's always been a thing, and I love that.
And
I absolutely love
like
that.
a few times you've been like, Sarah, I need 12 orcs painted by tomorrow. How are we going to make this happen?
And sit down at the house and we bound them out. So that was wonderful.
And you also keep a little Bluetooth speaker with Spotify going.
Sometimes I do, and not every game because we do have some auditory issues at the table, and it's been asked that it's not every time. But I have been known to do it because honestly, it's more inspiring for me. It reminds me of things, and so I will definitely use it to keep myself in the mind frame of the game, and then I extend that to my players for being able to play within the same mind frame that I'm in. Yep. So
it's a great subtle cue of the current mood of the scene.
Yeah, I think when things step away from that, I think is when it gets interesting, you know, when it gets more challenging. Sound effects are always fun, and I intend to employ that more in cases where silence is a thing, you know, the soundboard style, because I definitely have seen its advantages in the past when I've used it. I loved, like I said, using the one scene where I was using a digital map, but I had creaking and groaning of the trees to kind of show like it's old and it's hollowed out and there's, you know, the wind blowing through. I remember when you guys were on the mountain and I had the wind blowing. Through, because you guys were in the inn and you could hear the storm beating outside and the crackle of the fire, and it created that ambiance to remind you where you were.
Yeah, absolutely. So, absolutely.
Yep.
All right. That's the tools of the trade.
Yes.
What's your story about? What sort of story are you trying to tell? Where was the root? What's the underlying pinning of your story here?
So, the story started out as an idea initially about a world without gods. Like I said, it was going to be a homebrew. I knew that, but at the same time, I wanted my players to be able to create the characters that they wanted in it. I wanted to be able to have them either choose to be from the world or bring somebody in, and then I would figure out how to attach that and keep it part of the world. So we had, like, I wanted to be able to present the world. I wanted to be able to present how things are changing because this is a different world than they're not used to. This doesn't have gods in it and what role that plays on things.
Sure. And
then finally, like, kind of let the players choose, or characters choose, how that evolves and moves into the rest of the story. And I think I originally titled it Vanity of the Gods, because I had a very clear image, and I probably should have named it Smoke and Mirrors in the end, but I'll explain why as we move on. But that was my big thing, was that I wanted to have a homebrew world that any of my players could drop anything in.
Sure.
So
go with that in mind going in. What did your session 0 look like?
I didn't have a session 0. It was trash. I'll flat out say that. So
I wasn't actually there for the beginning of your campaign.
No, so the very beginning of the campaign, my session 0 was a character building exercise over the course of probably 2 to 3 weeks, where I had players, these great players who were writing me backstories, were telling me about their characters, and giving me this like rich depth of who they were, or not at all, and then asking me about the world, and it was like, well, I kind of need more. Like, who is your character? Like, who do you want to play? And they're like, well, I'm thinking of playing a half-orc. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you about the orcs and how they're different. And then that would blossom into a story. And so even my players who really hadn't thought much about their backstory suddenly had incredible backstory.
Yeah.
And so everybody had these rich stories to come into, and even you stepping into the game late with your first character, you still had a rich backstory. Because I had a place, I told you all about it, and you're like, okay, here's what's going on. I'm like, that fits perfectly.
Actually, it was the other way around, believe it or not. I came in and said, I want to play someone who got kicked out of a professional gladiatorial ring.
Yeah.
And you were like, actually, that's perfect, because I have a place where gladiatorial combat is going to take place anyways, and they're heading there right now.
Yep.
Cool.
Let's do this thing. Yeah. So yeah, I really didn't have a milk run either. I just kind of in media resed them right into a situation that opened with 2 of the players effectively being teleported into the world in a organic way, not necessarily feeling like it was magical, and then the other 2 characters coming upon them in a series of stepped events that led through the first story.
If you could go back and do it differently, would you?
Based on my setup and how I had the players involved, I think I would run the first session a little differently, but I don't think I would do the overall feel differently. I think I would have leaned harder into what the players told me about their character backgrounds and let those be the truth, versus adapting it and shifting it into the story more so that was their truth versus what was going on around them.
Sure. Okay.
So I think that would be my only changes.
Okay.
So
who are the people in your neighborhood?
Well, number one, by standard, my wife is in it, because she wanted to play, and I was excited about that. We have Erica and Trev,
two old friends. Erica is the person who got me introduced me to you, got me into the game, and is my oldest friend from high school.
Yep, Trevor's the partner, and I've known Trevor longer than I've known Erica. Chris, who is my resident everything when it comes to RPGs, and was my go-to for the longest time on like, what's this game? Because he has just an amazing like
encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah, it's amazing. I often wonder how much eidetic memory is going on there, because the recall is incredible. And Mad Elf was actually part of the game for a period of time.
For a bit, yeah. Then, unfortunately, he had to leave for work.
Yeah, and then the game kind of paused. And then I did have 2 other players who were going to be involved, and in one situation, it didn't work out timing-wise. There was no way to really fit them in. And then in the other one, it was a matter of scheduling and trying to see if we could even get their character made in the world. They were very leery about things going. We started down one road and went to another, and then it just ended up not working. But I'm glad that I didn't run it so big. And in fact, I didn't bring back the Mad Elf into the game, because at the point where I'd stepped it out, I was thinking, like, I need to leave this to make sure that I don't overburden myself.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out. I think that worked out, so.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the characters that those players brought to the table.
So,
how they kind of fit into your setting and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, which is interesting. So I'm going to start with the 2 that, who didn't exist in my world.
Okay.
So Memnon is a high wizard of Helrula in the Forgotten Realms universe as a whole. And basically is a mage who lives in a mageocracy where everything is magic. Like, I mean, they have microwaves and toasters, basically, that are magical. They do experiments. Everyone goes to magic school. Like, any non-magic people who exist in that are not necessarily on the lower end of the totem pole or anything like that, but like they're handicapped.
Yeah,
in comparison to society.
They're essentially second-class citizens.
Yeah,
but not that they're mistreated, but they are.
No. I mean, in some cases they probably are.
Sure.
But if you've heard of the term of the Red Wizards of Thea and that type of thing, that is the seat that we're talking about, that area.
Yep.
And that level of mageness, and this character was a apprentice to a greater mage. And that was the kind of step point is that he gets thrown into an experiment and ends up in the world. By whatever that experiment was. We then have Crowley Brightwind, who is from your world, Demosia, from again decades back. Crowley is a cleric of the
Destroyer.
The Destroyer,
yep.
By trade. Lived in a very dark kind of war-torn world that bad things happened in, but at the same point, there's a heavy hand of magic being played there. You've got, powerful magics that are controlling weapons of war and massive amounts of destruction, but at the same time, very tight families.
Yeah.
And connections to people. And this individual literally was searching through a battlefield. And kind of going through the broken remains, thinking about things, passed through just an archway that was left from a building or something, and walks into the world, not understanding, was that a gateway? There's no way to go back. Like, where am I now? The quick change, if you will,
sure.
and discovering that they were somewhere new. Both of those characters have evolved in different ways by coming into this world. Part of the world, we have Torok, who was a half orc. And I'll get into the differences with the orcs because they're pretty substantial, and where they kind of came from. But he's a very noble figure. He kind of paints himself as a knight, or like a roving knight, or not necessarily in the lordship fashion, but in the very respectful fashion. He is a respected fighter, and a respectful one at that. In shining plate mail, and just a very stout gentleman. His history is that his mother was a human and his father was the orc, and they met and fell in love. And in one of the passings of his family, he was separated from them, and they were locked up behind the great gate that the orcs have. And he hadn't seen his family in a very long time, but at the same time, part of being an orc is going and making a name for yourself and becoming something, and that's really what he focused on. We have Erwin.
Princess Shiv Shiv.
Erwin Marisul, who is a high elf from the western side of Garou, where the Great Forest sits. Her father, the king, she is the probably like fifth or sixth daughter in the line, and her father, who kind of unbeknownst to her was an adventurer but had a lot of friends, sent her away because he had knowledge that things might turn. And so he sent her to a finishing school, which was run by one of his friends, Deacon, which was basically a rogue school. And Deacon took care of her and made sure that she was well trained in the arts of shiving and running and stealth.
This is my friend Ra's al Ghul. Take care of my daughter, please.
Pretty much. Very much so in that sense. That Deacon was respected, and his school was very respected, and so it was a good place for her to hide out, because who would think that a princess would be halfway across the country in a little finishing school?
Right.
And so it really did make her father very comfortable about where she was. Unfortunately, he didn't realize that the world was going to catch up with her. Your character that stepped in late was Ferdinand Bonesunder. A pit fighter, from Galdea, and I'll explain Galdea as I get into things as well, and I'm talking about the world a little bit more. But effectively, had a falling out with the with the pit fighting arena because
falling out. No, I was kicked out directly because I was juicing.
You were juicing
with magic potions.
You were juicing. You did have effectively a drug addition with potions, but you had some good contacts there. You had a person who kind of watched over you and kept you clean. And in all honesty, when I saw that, I had a direct inspiration for it. And I'll get to that in the Galdea side, but that I could comfortably see who your character was and the twists that I threw into it. So it made it very easy and very, very real for me as I was building things.
Yep. And then when we had a bit of a break in the story, during which I was transitioning.
Yes.
Decided I did not want to play a big, burly, deep-voiced fighter anymore.
Correct.
And so I retired Ferdinand for my own mental sanity, and came in with Ravana Morton.
Yeah, so Ravana came about because the group was going to end up having to go to the Orclands, and the Orclands are hiding behind. Basically, they sit in a crater of sorts, amidst very, very, very high mountains.
Yeah.
And the only way into that mountain range, as most people are aware, is through a very narrow pass that is protected by a gate, not unlike the gates of Mordor. It's gigantic. It's massive. And a lot of traps and magic that protect it, that the orcs and, gnomes put together. So they would need a guide to get them over the mountains, and so a guide was requested, and the elves are very good about finding what they need, and brought in Ravana, who is this powerful mage with a lot of knowledge of the mountains and of the winter and of the cold. And the way you had described the character of basically being shoved out into the snow and said, survive it.
Yeah.
You make your peace or survive it.
I took a lot of inspiration from Paimei from Kill Bill.
Very true, very true. And as time went on, even Doctor Strange, here's a portal, figure out how to get home.
Yeah, the scene from Doctor Strange was very much Ravana's origin story of maybe you'll freeze to death, maybe you'll figure out how to make a portal.
Yep.
Who's to see?
Exactly. So, and then, Matt's character, who was there briefly, was Rowan, and Rowan was incredible. He was a ranger, always kind of got himself into trouble, with his dog. But generally a jolly guy, and I loved that. Everything was okay.
Yeah,
there was never really anything that kept Rowan down. So that was a beautiful part about.
That's just kind of Matthew too.
That is, he kind of got to play himself, which I loved. I loved that. So, so I'll kind of break into the world a little bit, and try not to go too far. So,
well, let's focus on the things that are different from standard D&D. So,
fair enough.
Your orcs,
yes,
are very much not the bloodthirsty evil race.
In the least at all. They are a cultured race, almost a kind of a cross between Roman and I would say Old English.
Yeah, I got a very Roman feel from them.
Yeah, it's that time period that we fantasize about, but they still were very tribal. They still had their hard family connections of the tribes and how they moved, but built fine cities. They were amazing craftsmen. They were one of the first races to really reach out culturally and very quickly. And so because of that, the image of an orc showing up is impressive. People it's like seeing a knight in shining armor riding down the path. You're like, oh my god, there's an orc here.
An orc is here. Oh wow, what did we do to deserve an orc?
Literally
this
the
is great.
First half of the game, I made it known that every time he was there, almost somebody in every pub would be like, is that an orc? Oh, it's a half orc. Still, it's an orc.
Yeah.
We haven't seen an orc in over 100 years. Over 50 years, people would tell these stories. It was unsure exactly how long ago it was, but it was long enough that people recognized that they hadn't seen one, that they really had been, and that they were recognized to being very noble creatures, and as a race. And that, I think that really made it, strong. I didn't want them to be, a race that was immediately hated. My elves, on the other hand, I wanted to be, very aristocratic. I wanted them to have an almost House of Lords and king, the early days.
I dare say that's pretty standard in D&D.
It is, but at the same time, the king himself wasn't a classic king. He was doing without much staring. You could see that he didn't fit in. Like, he wasn't about the politics. He was about trying to figure out what was right and wrong, and that didn't work out. I kind of saw him as like an Arthur character who, from Arthurian legend, who was doing the best he could, but clearly didn't know what he had gotten into.
Gotcha.
So, and the elves had all of the trappings, dark elves, wild elves, but nothing was cut and dry. Nothing was directly evil or anything like that. They all were part of the same group.
Yeah, there's like cultural differences, there's cultural separations between them.
Yeah.
Now your gnomes, on the other hand, I think your gnomes took a lot of, I get some really strong like World of Warcraft vibes off of them, in that they're highly technological, like they've almost got a Clockwork City thing going on.
Exactly, and in fact they were the first race that the orcs met with, and
a lot of the orcs' high technology was built by the gnomes, which is a major plot point.
Yeah, and they're the walls of their city, the finery, the size and scale was all built by the orcs, so they worked a lot of hand in hand and actually built, and you guys did discover, the subterranean steam system that controlled the city, that had a clock that basically was its regulator and kept the whole city running on time, if you will.
Yep.
And I had that image in my mind of this giant clockwork city that was running by this clock in the city.
Yep.
And give them that access, that this was very free thinking, this was very technology forward, and that they were the finest tinkers and crafters, period. End of story. And they saw that above all things. And I didn't have a player like that, but I wanted that feel to be there in the game.
Yep.
So, humans were the latecomers. They basically are very cut and dry humans of any world, where they are, kind of solo. They keep to themselves. There's a level of spirituality that sits over the top of them, but at the same time, commerce is heavy in their minds.
Yeah.
And their control of space of Ingaru is that wishes to be very expansive. Their kingdom kind of stretches without rule, but within its duchies, like the king takes care of the kingdom of humans, but not necessarily the space they occupy. So it's interesting that how they handle that through commerce. Which leads me to my halflings. My halflings in my world were my travelers. They basically, I penned them off of the trope of the weary entertainers and tradesmen and Wells Fargo-esque, where, the Wells Fargo wagon shows up. Ooh, we're all excited. Is it the thing that I'd asked for from the human realms because I know this guy? Or is it something that I've never seen before? So these people would bring entertainment. They'd bring everything.
Are they going to have red cabbage so we can finish the community center in year one?
Exactly. That kind of thing. Like, literally that kind of thing. And so I wanted them
Cheers
to
to you if you got that reference.
Yeah. And I wanted them to be that race that could connect everything. But they didn't need a space. The world was their oyster.
Sure.
So, and I actually had that penned as they would be the finest captains as well. So, because they travel so much. The one weirdness that I did throw into the game, and particularly was because I did it, was that there was an area that was Galdea. And Galdea sat on the eastern coast and was its own thing, like city, kingdom thing.
You described it to me as almost like medieval Las Vegas.
Very much so. There was there's a high wall that blocks basically access to it. And no other race's laws applied within the city. Only the city's law applied. So if a thief or a murderer or someone who was exiled somewhere else came into the city and there were hunters coming after him, the city would protect that individual because within their city walls that they were a different person.
No extradition.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you came in, don't go messing with the status quo. The Mask does not like that. And the Mask was a group that I wanted to have there, where this city was controlled by a conglomerate syndicate of individual groups that all came together and basically said, we want this place to prosper our way. So we're going to control the strongest port and make sure everything comes in the door. We're not going to question what it is. We're going to make sure that it makes it to where it needs to go. And if it, in this city will be the best because of it. And it really was. It was a crazy city, of everything you could think of.
Yep.
So.
All right, so we talked about your characters a little bit. Yes. Let's talk about just like the evolution of your plot here, because I know it did over the time it has changed a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely has.
So like in the beginning, you had mentioned that like your inspiration at first was that you wanted a story just kind of about the characters. You wanted it very character driven. You let everybody kind of create their own characters as richly and as vividly, even from differing worlds, and pull them into yours. So their backstory didn't even directly have to tie into the world you were creating. And then you wanted to lean heavily into their own personal stories and make that, integrate their characters heavily into the world. So, I mean, other than putting that all on your characters and all on your players, did you yourself as the storyteller have any sort of direction when you started? Did you have like a meta plot in mind of like, okay, sure, they're all going to contribute to the story, but we're all going to be, following this plot thread? Or was this more of just like I'm going to do generic D&D stuff and see what floats to the surface?
Before I even had, the world whole in my head, I had this image of a world that didn't have gods, that had forces, life, death, nature, magic. And I thought about it and I was like, okay, if a god got a glimpse of this and they needed a space, who would it be? And so I started looking through the Forgotten Realms gods, because one of my players was looking at the Forgotten Realms, and I was like, okay, who's somebody who is wronged, in a way, who feels they're wronged, is looking for something? And I came across Weejas. And I said, here's a woman who, if she had an opportunity to take over as a god of magic in a brand new world, she would eat that alive. She would jump right in, because she's had nothing but problems. If you read through some of her stuff or know anything about her, you know that she's been messed with by other gods several times over, and she is tricksy, to say the least, about magic.
Sure.
But she's also stepped into other things. So I wanted to have that as a god. I wanted her to be the god who stepped in and wanted to try and take control. And then I started looking, okay, what forces or individuals came to aid that situation? How did she get an image of this world? What was the difference? And so that's when I started kind of framing Garou, the world, and started looking at what the players were offering and said, okay, what story can I write that really presents this opportunity and ties my players together? And so I came up with the idea that there was already a group of adventurers who had been in Garou. They had done a bunch of stuff. And during their lives, things happened, and one of them learned that there was going to be an untimely death or an uncertain future for one of the others that they felt very strongly about in their family, whether it was love or just a heavy kinship. And so they took it upon themselves that they were going to change events.
Okay.
And the story was basically was my players discovering that truth as the events are transposed and this person's trying to stop. And then watching those events come to pass anyways. And then making their own decisions about how the future should end up.
Right.
So that's kind of the premise of the story as a whole, which is funny. Until I wrote it down for the show today, I really hadn't put it in one succinct paragraph, and it felt kind of nice to actually put that down. So after all this time.
No, at the time when you were getting this going, were you thinking that this was going to be a gigantic multi-year campaign, or were you kind of uncertain how this would all unfold?
Like any good storyteller, I was like, this will maybe run a year.
You wee summer child.
Yeah,
you sweet summer child.
I had an idea, and really was questioning it until the players got involved. And I kept wondering how and who was going to be involved in things. But after a year of playing it, I realized I had a monster.
Yeah.
Like this was going...
You haven't scratched the surface. You've got more questions than answers.
And I'm like they're digging through the world. I want to keep presenting to them. I kind of want them. And the players, you guys were enthusiastic about it. You were like, what's going on with this? I want to know more about this. And that ebb and flow of like understanding and struggle, kept me wanting to keep presenting and keep presenting. And that's really what it was about, was like, I was proud and enthusiastic of my players. And I love when I get to that point where I'm rooting for them and I want to see where they're going to go. And so that kind of kept driving me. And as I kept going, it was like, oh my God, this ball is getting bigger and bigger, because I didn't put any rails on it. I kind of let the baby run.
Yeah.
And it ran. Oh God, did it run? Oh my God, did it run? So,
all right, so as time goes on, and as you said, the baby starts running. You start it starts kind of forming into this like this monster. So you've got a definite shift in tone from just kind of a character-based story to now you've got this world that's developing in their wake and whatnot. How did you go about like shifting the tone from monster of the week, character-driven storytelling to something that is a bit more of a big meta plot, and potentially going to war with a god?
So when we first started, it was 2 times a month. It did feel much like a race. Like every time I was writing, I felt like I needed to write more, and I needed to come up with more to explain the points to get from point A to point B. And it was really exhausting. It really was. And so, I switched my mind frame to a doom clock and started working toward relevant points in time. I knew I had to get to a point where the king was exposing what was going on with him, and there were problems there. I needed to expose that there were issues going on with the orcs. I needed to expose that there were issues going on with the humans. I needed to eventually get to a point where I had a hard change in the story that I had penned that was going to be a hard move. I had actually 2 hard moves that I needed to get through. One was the abdication of the king, and the character being risen to king status, Vicky's character being risen to king status, and the point of what that was going to be, as well as a shift into this prophecy, the final act. So I knew I had to get to those, and I knew I had a doom clock to get there, and I think that really changed my focus and helped me say, okay, now I'm not going to write what's the next moment, but more so like I'm going to present things in a different way and write my stories more about the event. Like I'm preparing for that next Doom event, and what is the things that I need for that next Doom event. So I think that was my big shift there. And now in the 4th act, I've reopened that. Here are the things that you know. I've given you all the cards. Everything's now in play, and given you the assets as players to know the final points. It's just the finer points of getting to that finish, that closer. That's the part that's
working through the resolution and tying up those loose ends. Yeah.
Right. And so now it's not so much heavy work on my side so much as just remembering all the pieces that have been in play for the last 7 years.
Right on.
So
now when you did move to a more, meta plot style campaign, did you, and you said you kind of employed like a doom clock sort of thing. Did you have like an ideal path that your players would be guided towards, or were you content to allow for more of like a sandbox style play?
So there were times earlier on when I first started doing it that there was a road that was being followed. I was kind of leaving breadcrumbs. It was invisible. I wasn't like giving them maps saying you go from here to here to here. But it did feel very railroady when I first did it. I mean, I was literally doing the Final Fantasy like, hey, Sid showed up with his airship and he's going here. Are you gonna join him? Are you gonna join him?
No. Well, I don't think that's very good.
Yeah.
Are you gonna join him?
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, it was one of those kinds of moments. So,
but these people need our help.
Yeah. And then, oh no, a storm knocked the airship out of the air. to this location.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of stuff. I did that and made terrible hard moves at the time, but some of it was feeling necessary. So then I shifted my mind frame about how I wanted to present effectively the clues of the plot and the events of the plot. And so instead I rolled back and took my mind frame of, okay, what do I have to expose?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have to expose this. Does that have to be anywhere specific? No. Let the players choose where it is. Great. Okay, where are you guys going next?
Quantum ogres.
We're going here. Yeah, exactly. Quantum ogres show up here instead.
Yep.
So quantum, plot elements show up here.
Yep.
The trick was I had to remember that that's where I placed it. That's where it came into the world. You guys will remember that, and boom, we will return to that point in reference.
The plot point leading to Act 3 has been changed. Please make a note of it.
Exactly. And honestly, that really helped me change from writing scenes and images of what I expected to writing exposés. Like, oh, now they've discovered that Kaymor is an ancient who helped create these orbs of power. Oh shit. Okay, he needs to, he's someone not only to be trusted, but also now has a lot of knowledge. We need him. Those types of things.
Yep.
So.
Alright, so we've moved kind of from our character-driven things. We've made this transition, fumbled around a bit with our plot and whatnot, but we've kind of hit this home stretch, especially after the long hiatus. We've got, a lot more experience and time under our belt and whatnot. And so we're kind of in the final act of your game, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going for wrapping up a lot of these loose threads and stuff like that. Do you feel like you were successful in tying your plot threads together into a succinct meta plot? Like, do you think you made that transition, successfully? And if so, like, what hurdles did you experience while doing so?
So, even before moving into the final plot, points and making the hard move and actually getting to 5th edition, I remembered that my players were having a hard time keeping track of things. There was a lot of things going on. There were a lot of things that they could do. And so it made the quests seem like, what's important, what's inconsequential, what should we be staring at? So I actually made quest cards.
Mm-hmm.
that helped,
I remember that.
That helped kind of keep things moving forward, because at that point I think we had also shifted to monthly, and that was also kind of messing with things. There was a lot going on. Players were just confused.
It was less stress on you, but it was also lengthening the amount of time that we had to just forget what happened last
Exactly.
session. Yeah.
So moving into the 4th act, I needed to close things up. And the good news was there's nothing better to close up a whole bunch of quests
than an apocalypse.
And killing your players for 200 years. And then resurrecting them. So that at that point, a lot of things become meaningless. And you suddenly realize that the important things are that you're alive and that
Final Fantasy VI does.
Yeah, exactly. So so stepping into the 4th act, I did a hard move where a bad thing happened, and the player stepped into effectively a future world that was very different.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it easy, but it also made me set clear goals. It allowed me to represent all of the information that you had learned in a different way.
Yeah.
So that it was like, okay, these are the details that are important. Mm-hmm. Here are the players that are involved. Let's cut down that NPC queue to just a few things, but we can make cameos all over the place. And I did.
And you drop in little bits of knowledge of things like, this is what's lasted for 200 years. This is how it's evolved over 200 years.
Exactly.
Here's a shadow of the thing you used to remember, and here's what it looks like now.
Yeah, so, and the fun thing was always like, oh, you come here, and like, oh, I remember this. And I'm like, well, what do you remember? And they're like, oh, and then this was here, and this here. That is still there, but it is now broken, Or, oh, man, I remember this guy. Could he still be here as a ghost? Well, it's been 250 years. Let's find out. Mm-hmm. And so I could rebirth memories from my players that were 5-6 years old,
but easily get rid of things that were extraneous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And present important information that way. And it felt really cool to be able to create, and I'll give you guys effectively a checklist that you slowly checked off until you're like, okay, well, we only have a few things left to do before doing the thing.
Yeah.
And really understanding what's going on. So.
and you successfully accomplished giving my character a complete existential crisis and making her think that she wasn't real for several game sessions.
Yeah,
but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, never not gracefully tell your players that they are resurrected, because they may think that they're actually just homunculi and toys of someone else.
Well, the problem is that Overwatch's character is, like, we're both wizards, right? But, like, my character's like a geologist or a climatologist, you know?
Yeah, I'd give it that.
Whereas his character's more like an astrophysicist. So when an astrophysicist tells you, oh yeah, this black hole is totally going to swallow the world, the climatologist doesn't know enough, like, very focused in my own bailiwick, in my own area of study, but, like, I don't know what black holes do. I study the climate, you know?
I often look at the two of you. One is a theoretical physicist, and the other one is a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a theoretical physicist. He can tell you all of the things that the universe could do, and probably does.
Whereas I work in hard, measurable forces.
You're like, show me an experiment that does this. Well, you can't create an experiment because we need infinite energy. Well, infinite energy doesn't exist. Actually, it does if you do the following things.
What effing good are you, Memnon?
Yeah. No, but you guys evolved in amazing ways, and I love it.
It's hilarious.
I love it.
So, okay, now, again, kind of touching on the whole evolution of your story and stuff like that, and now that we are in the home stretch, and you've got this, like, clear 2020 hindsight to look back on your plot with.
2020 hindsight. That's even funnier.
2022 hindsight.
Thank you.
What would you have done differently? Kind of looking, since we are at the end of your campaign.
Yeah. I think it's a hard question overall, because there's so many things that evolved from the game in a good, organic way for me, and I learned a lot. That saying if I changed them, would it have made it better is challenging. Mm-hmm. I would say I probably would have limited the scope drastically. Mm-hmm. I would have cut down the story heavy. I would probably have presented the cast, given a much more ABC kind of direction of events, and finished, versus letting my players stumble through the dark warehouse to find a light switch only to discover that it's a maze back to the door on the way out. Like, that's effectively what happened. I 100% admit that, and it makes me a terrible GM, but I've gotten better.
I do remember sitting you down a couple times and going, I have no clue what's happening here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every time we answer a question, we just get more questions as an answer. So.
One question would ask 3 more questions.
Yep.
But I think if I did it over again, I probably would have exposed the history differently. Mm-hmm. I would have, and sooner, way sooner. I'd have my NPCs explain more and know more, so that it came out quicker, that it wasn't having to talk to as much and move around as much. I also would have closed loops on adventures much tighter, so that we could have said, we're done with this.
Yeah.
This is open to continue. Do we wanna? So that I could give that. And I think that was the biggest misstep that I had is that I never really gave hard resolution to my plots. Mm-hmm. It was always, you finish this only to discover this and this.
Yeah.
And that made you at times want to continue going, or begrudgingly like, we can't let this just happen. Mm-hmm. This can't be the end. And I think that was my biggest mistake there is that I didn't close the loop and then let you guys decide, like, hey, what happens with this then? Like, mm-hmm. let you ask the questions to say, okay, you want to find out?
Yeah.
And let that keep going. I think that was my disservice. I think that was my hard piece there.
Fair enough.
So.
All right, so we're kind of getting into the tail end of the breakdown here. You've got some interesting things that have come out of this campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's been years. Number one, there's nothing like saying I ran a game for 15 years, 7 of which we actually played hard.
Yeah.
It's probably been more than 7, but I will say 7 strong. I've watched characters change. And I wouldn't say change, evolve drastically.
Yeah.
Like, drastically. I remember you switching characters as a player and watching you change as a player, mm-hmm. which was amazing. And I love both of your characters. I really did.
Oh yeah, sure. I loved Ferdinand too. I couldn't play him anymore because he was so masculine, and that was a very difficult thing for me to keep portraying at the time of my life. So
yeah. But I love Ravana, and even Ravana has had drastic changes.
Yeah.
I wanted to present everyone with a challenge in the fourth act that was very personal.
Yeah. She used to be very lighthearted, very matter of fact, but very lighthearted. But it took an apocalypse to kind of break her, and she's definitely got some things on her shoulders, and she's got a little bit of a nihilistic attitude now.
Yeah, I mean, in one case, I've got a player who is trying to figure out the truth of the world, and how that's going to play out, and has an investment because they believe a certain way about magic and what it's worth. And I think that has really started to shine. That's Memnon. I've got another player who lost their people. Like my king of the elves. She lost her people 100%. And that was a heavy weight to take, like knowing that most of them were probably dead.
Yeah.
And didn't die in a way that was befitting of their people at all. And the truth that had to go into that, and make some hard decisions about who they were as a person and how they took ownership of their people.
Yeah.
Likewise, Crowley, who I gave an existential crisis of faith to, of being so far away from the faith that they started with, has completely switched and has now gone from a god of, a follower of destruction and understanding it to entropy. And understanding that there's a cycle to it.
Yeah.
And so much as being concerned that they may have been a deity of their own for a period of time. My knightly character, Tarok, I wouldn't say so much has changed, so much has just slowly become more and more noble.
Yeah. I think shed the visage of the questing knight. And more taken up the warrior's mantle. And in fact, is actually on the council now. So
is kind of leading to a degree his people into a new direction.
Yeah.
Chieftain's
mantle.
Yeah. And your character, I will 100% say, like you were saying, has changed and shifted. But also has found some level of, like, went from a world that, and literally, like, I'm not even doing the job that I was said to do. Like, I was supposed to be scouting. I was supposed to get you guys over the mountains and go home. That was my job. And literally now I'm 250 years in the future. Everyone I know is dead. Why am I even here? And
I might not even be real?
Yeah, I might not, like
do we get true resurrected or what? Am I a figment of someone's imagination?
Exactly. I need to protect these people. And these individuals, this has meaning to me. Holy shit! Like now,
I found something amidst this crap pile that means something to me, and I'm going to defend it with my life and every ounce of magic. Yeah.
So I think that was the big thing, and the shifting of the plot as I had it. And it always amazes me to go back and look at my notes and read about my players and what they've said and how that has changed to today. And it's fun hearing the stories from 7 years ago, from player to player. Like hearing Ravana listen to stories about a time from before Bone Sunder was in the game, between two characters bantering, at a fireside or during a fight even, and we have camaraderie, and I love it. I absolutely love that. You can't fake that. I mean, you can, but it doesn't have the same feeling, and I love watching it. I love seeing that in game.
Yeah, I'll definitely say it's one of the better, one of the things I think I enjoy the most about your game is the organic, I don't even know if it's camaraderie in some ways, but like I've also kind of got like that rivalry with Memnon, and but that all plays out organically,
very much so
at the table, and I really like the inter-character interactions.
Yeah, you definitely all of you slip into character very quickly. It's wonderful. So
what were some trouble things for you? Just a little stumbling blocks along the way for you.
Players forgot a lot.
Yeah.
That made it very hard. It was very hard to keep things ticking along down a path if they don't remember what happened last.
Especially coming back from the hiatus.
That was super hard. But it also kind of helped in the hard shift that I did.
Sure.
It kind of gave me a restart point.
Yeah. But especially too, though, like coming back from the hiatus for you, like on a personal note, was you and your family had been through a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
Over that hiatus, and it was a necessary hiatus for health reasons.
Yeah.
And, so, when you were like, I think I'm going to get my game going, like every single one of your characters or one of your players showed back up and was like, awesome. What do you need from us? Like we were just so overjoyed to see you getting back in behind the screen.
Yeah. Being creative again
and trying to, resume some sort of normality in your life that like, absolutely, man. Like, I don't care if it's been 7 years. I don't care if I've forgotten all of your plot. Like, remind us, whatever. Let's roll some dice.
And I think that helped out a lot, and it got me through quite a bit, and it was wonderful.
Absolutely.
It really was. Shifting from 3 to 5, I would say, was not necessarily easy, but at the same time, I just had to let things go. I had to let balance go out the door and just be like, okay, I'm going to present shit.
Yeah.
And let it happen.
Yeah.
So that was a big change there for me. I did lose a lot of focus and wondered if I should stop the game cold turkey and just walk away. But I couldn't. I think that was kind of a troubling thing, was because I had invested so much that I was like, I can't do this to my players.
Yeah.
I really can't. So, and I think
a bit of that like sunk cost fallacy almost, where it's like we've been playing for so long and we've got so much involved in the story that we might as well just swing it into the last act and just go for broke.
Yeah, so I think that was it. But, I mean, even amidst all the trouble, all of the things that I ran into, my terrible notes at times, falling apart, railroading things, doing pretty much all of the terrible things that DMs do behind the screen, I learned a lot. And taking the break and restarting and having a refresh point kind of let me shake some of that off.
Yeah.
And then evolve faster and cleaner from there.
And I think that's one of the greatest things about, like, especially having a game that runs so consistently and for so long, is that you do work through a lot of those stumbling blocks that storytellers have. It happens organically at the table, and you look back on it and you go, okay, well, maybe I'll do this different next time. But with that consistency, with that practice, you do get a lot better at storytelling.
Yep. So.
And finally, your inspirations. What were some things that you little snippets you want us to know that fell into this game for you?
So, Galdea. The city of Galdea, which I said was kind of like Vegas. I remembered watching the anime Samurai 7, which is a Seven Samurai rebirth. And in it, one of the characters is the dear friend of a warrior, if you will, a fighter for one of the who had fallen in a battle, and they had lost touch with each other, and they had actually died and kind of drifted down, or didn't die, but kind of had been injured and drifted into this community, this secret community. And I looked at this community, and it was very small, but I liked what I had seen. It was a very protected community. It was hidden in a valley, and it was, but it was entertaining, and there was good food and drink, and things were just allowed to happen there. And I took that, and I was like, okay, I can work with this. Like, I can work with this image of people who care about their community, even if their community isn't perfect, but is energized, and they're making the best of the world that they can. And I was like, I'm going to work with this and make Galdea. Like, I'm going to make the better view of what a syndicate might do for a community.
Yeah, right on.
And like protect them from like, oh, the laws of the humans say this. Hey buddy, that's on that side of the wall. Kiss off. At the same time, I wanted to have the humans have a Judge Dredd kind of aspect where they had law, and law was hard. Yeah. Meaning it's enforced by magic. Like they actually have orbs of law there that when you're near them, you're compelled to do lawful things.
Or if you break the law, you feel compelled to blurt it out. I have just killed a man in cold blood. Please take me into custody. Why did I just say that?
Exactly. That kind of a thing. And because of like how that would affect and change communities, and not only that, but like the wizards who help people on the road as they travel between these communities, these Justicars who basically show up and they're like, hey, I see you're on your way to this town. I'm going to give you a copy of their laws because you're going to, as you get closer, you're going to note that you're going to have to follow these kind of subtle laws. So just to keep in mind, here's where things are at, or like, oh, this happened on the road between these two places. Okay, we're going to help take care of the legal issues here and handle that. All the way out to the hard stuff that happens within the cities, and them being the judge and jury, effectively, like when someone comes up and says, I just stole some bread. All right, you stole some bread. Let's deal with this. Come on back over here. Are you going to pay him? I can't pay him right now. All right, so he can't pay you right now. Okay, what kind of repercussions? And deal with that on a person-to-person basis.
Yep.
I wanted to have that lighter hand of Judge Dredd, if you could. And I think that worked out pretty well. And I used Sam and Max as two characters.
Oh, yeah.
If you're familiar with the cartoon character Sam and Max, a very large dog, anthropomorphic dog, and I want to say Max is a bunny?
I think so. Sounds right.
But he's fucking crazy. But I loved that they were like an investigative duo. And so I kind of made two Justicars. The first two Justicars, they meet Sam and Max.
I love it.
Where one of them is kind of a little more wily and wants to do things that way, and the other is very straightforward and by the book.
I love that you and I both did that, actually, because I have a couple of the people from the Sijic Order in mind that are Friday and Ganon from Dragnet.
Yep. I love being able to
I need a cop duo. What pop culture can I pull from?
Yeah, and I think it's a very good way of handling those types of things.
That's great.
And there were lots of other little things that rolled through my game that were inspirations from movies and music. Music had a huge impact on how I moved through the plot as a whole. Was it Viva la Vidi from, it's a song, I can't say the name right, and I apologize. But there's a line in the song, where, it's, in the morning I sleep alone, I sweep the streets that I used to own. And that line rolled in my head specifically about Vicky's father. This king who was going to have to abdicate, and what was going to happen to him? Where was he going to end up once he abdicated? Like, he's not going to own anything anymore. Like, how is his world going to fall apart? What ends up with, where does he end up? And I kind of had a vision for how that felt. And so I would play that for myself to remind me of it. And so there was a lot of that in it, and the music over the years I still have playlists that I listen to all the time.
You pull a lot of your inspiration from music.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I've had a lot of these conversations with you and of little inspirations over the years, and that's usually like, I was listening to this song and,
it's my mind goes to visuals.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it helps. It really does.
Absolutely.
It really does. There's been a lot of shower moments of eureka,
All right, so we are severely over time as usual with these campaign breakdowns. But we do have some questions.
Okay,
we got a bunch of questions. So I'm going to fire them at you here.
Sure, we'll try and hit these fast if they've already been covered.
So Nevim asks a couple questions here. Have players been playing the same characters for those 15 years?
Yes, only you switched characters, and I've lost 2 technically.
And only because I changed genders along the way, so or gender presentations, I should say.
Other than that, no class changes, no respecs, nothing.
Yep.
So,
all right. How do you manage to keep the flame burning for over a decade?
It's really hard. I will say that it's because they're my dear friends. Like you guys are very dear to me, and it keeps me invested. It hasn't been easy for either of us.
I imagine it would have been very easy just to say, all right, I'm just throwing the campaign away, if when you said, I think I'm going to run a game again, if all of your players hadn't just immediately reported for duty.
Right. I think I would have walked away from it at that point. And I think it would have been hard for me to walk into another game.
I imagine it would have been.
So,
yeah.
So I think that made it very different for me and brought me back into gaming, really.
So how did you, over this 15 years, how do you manage the evolution of characters?
It wasn't easy. A lot of it was listening and watching the changes and discovery of players and trying to see what they were discovering. Like the small events. Watching Crowley change from this person of destruction to a person of entropy. and giving them opportunities. Like, at one point, Crowley literally had their hand on the orb of destruction.
Yeah.
And channeled to kill one of the villains.
Committed just mass genocide.
Well, not only that, but I don't think the intention was there. I don't think Crowley himself knew exactly how far it was going to go, but did will it.
Yeah.
Wanted to power word kill this thing, and did. Unfortunately, it went 100 times fold because they said, kill my enemy. And expected it to be the enemies in the space, but in fact went through the gateway beyond them, killing everyone else that was there.
Yep.
You know, literally thousands of orcs died by Crowley's hand, and I think that made a significant impact. And watching that and being like, okay, how am I now going to present situations after that? Not nearly as dramatic, that still have the feel, the tenor that goes in it. And your character, coming new as Ravana, listening to you as a player talk about your detachment from the world and trying to help figure out what that was, and then giving you presentations of attachment.
Yeah. And giving me things to latch onto and find meaning to find amongst the wreckage. Right.
Yeah.
Let's see here. How did you expect the campaign to run? Did you expect the campaign to run such a lengthy time? I think we talked about this.
No. I expected it to be about a year.
And then you just saw what a monster you'd created and went, oh god, we gotta go longer.
Yeah, and now I'm definitely trimming things back. I only deal with narrative scenes that are important. And if you guys are doing combat, like, I either trim the combat heavily with skill checks and things like that to make it easy, or make it very meaningful. And
you would also mention too that there was a lot of things that kind of got out of hand from scope because you weren't tying up plot lines as succinctly as you wanted. You were introducing a lot of characters and a lot of ambiguity and stuff like that. So so Tim Saucer asks, what part of your campaign are you the most proud of?
Oof. That's a big.
You've
question.
only got 15 years worth to pick from, so make it good.
Yeah, I want to say the in-jokes and stories that the players put together, or not even so much the characters recite after 7 years. I still have in-jokes of Spellbeggar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that the cleric at Slam being called a Spellbeggar.
Crowley Inslayer.
Yeah, Inslayer. Like, little in-jokes that the players have between each other, or stories that they have, items that they recall, that they pull out and use that are years, like literally years old, makes it feel like you're really in one of the like fantasy novels where you're not just like reading about a moment in their history that they're describing to you.
You've got organically created history, and that's a rare thing to touch on,
But not only that, but they remember it.
Yeah.
They like having you guys return to places.
Right.
The oubliette, where you found Kaymor, and having everybody like, wait, I remember this space. I remember what was here. Okay. This is where we found the mugs, the magic mugs, and that's enjoyable. That's something that I can really smile about and say that's what this game was really, I could take away from this game and be very, very happy about.
And you too, like, personally have evolved a lot as a storyteller.
There's a lot of things I'll never do again. There's a lot of pieces of story, and there's a lot of things now that I do because of even STC and things that we've studied, where I would say I would be it makes me a different gamer or game master every time I literally sit down at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I love that.
IGJFCF, Charles, asks, you'd be amazed to learn how you didn't get bored of the same campaign after so long.
Oh, I did. Several times. I can flat out say I did. I remember a few times sitting down in front of you saying, I just need to finish this.
Yeah.
Like, I am tired. It's just long. There's so much I'm dealing with. I said it to Vicky a number of times over the years where I'd come out of a game where it'd be coming up to a game session and I'd be like, I'm exhausted. It feels like a marathon and that doesn't end.
Like, I'm happy my friends are coming over to play Dungeons and Dragons with me, but like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is almost like pulling teeth now.
Yeah. But at the same time,
I remember you having that conversation with me a couple times,
But
recently.
Yeah. I'm excited to finish it.
Yeah.
Like, I want the finish to have meaning and impact. The sunk cost fallacy, as you put it.
Yeah.
Like, I can't
You're 90% of the way through. You can't stop now.
No, and I've got people depending on me. I've got this whole thing behind it, and I feel like if I just let these characters die on the vine, that they just shrivel up and we don't know what ends here.
Nobody gets closure.
Nobody gets
you.
closure, and my wife hates cliffhangers.
Yeah.
So I need to find an end on this if I want to keep that relationship going. So, yeah. So that's mine.
All
there we go. I've unpacked.
That was a lot.
It was a lot.
But you did it.
I did. I got through it.
So, obviously if anybody has any follow-up questions, for Rob about his campaign setting, about, his thought process, how he evolved the campaign over the time, so that you don't feel were answered here.
Yeah.
Hit us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, shoot us up on our Discord. We're more than happy to share any of our resources with you, but that's Rob's game, start to finish there,
So, next week is the first of the month, so we're going to get back to our 101 series. We're going to talk about what is an adventure, and we're going to break down the components of the smaller part. We've been talking about plots, we've been talking about other things.
It's a bit more of like our 101 version of, okay, now how do we let you do all the stuff we literally just talked about in this episode,
Right. And how do you make it granular so that you're not talking about the epic plot, the whole plot thing. You're talking about this particular episode that you're going to bring your players into, and what are the equations like for being able to make that work in an organic way?
Make it bite-sized and engaging for your players.
Yeah, without it saying, this is a this episode or this is a this. Like, what chunks do I need to make sure that I have to make that decision of how do I want to play this?
Yep,
so.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up. We've had more than enough crammed in here. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram, ST_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to, have you shoot some questions to us, join the discussion, bounce some ideas off your fellow storytellers. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help us out every month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, Subjet, and Hulavu. We really appreciate all of your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. I highly recommend you guys go out there. It is very, very fun to find good music. Intro music is by Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geekfrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're listening to right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for supporting and loving us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables for 15 years for this campaign.
15 years.
And you, every single one of our listeners. Thank you so much. We love you. Every single one of you.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.